number of international students has almost tripled over the last 20 years. And the gender gap among international students is increasingly narrowing. But unfortunately, the gender gap for international migrants overall is growing, and it's larger than it ever has been. And we have to do more to reverse this trend. It's not just because it's a nice thing to do. It's because years of research shows us how successfully empowering migrant women is central to sustainable development goals at both the individual and at the household level. In many cases, migrant women are the key drivers of better development outcomes. In fact, women migrant workers send a greater share of their wages back to their countries of origin than their male counterparts do, which is driving growth in their communities. And back home, remittance recipients are predominantly women, and they're investing in education and in healthcare. Household savings have also increased as a result of women receiving these remittances. So investing more in gender-responsive efforts not only tackles gender discrimination and helps address structural gender inequalities, it pays long-term dividends in terms of sustainable development for communities around the world. Now, one of the biggest problems that we're seeing around the world is an unprecedented number of internally displaced people, triggered largely by conflict, by climate change, and by disaster. Today, a record number of more than 71 million people have been displaced within the borders of their country, 75% of them in just 10 countries. But displacement is different depending on the region. Here in Asia, including right here in Bangladesh, disasters such as floods, cyclones, wildfires, earthquakes are driving internal displacement in increasing numbers. Of the countries with the largest numbers of people who were displaced by disasters in 2022, 5 of them were here in Asia. And this continues a longer-term trend of displacement in Asia, unlike any other in the world. So one of our strategic priorities is to drive solutions to displacement, particularly as a result of disasters fueled by climate change. We have to be much more proactive in this area. We cannot wait until millions of people have been displaced when there are ways to enable communities to adapt proactively so that they can be more stable and have more choices. Now, climate change is driving more new displacement than ever before, but the biggest problem is still conflict. We see that here in Bangladesh, where nearly 1 million Rohingya people have been forced to flee their homes because of ongoing conflict in their home country. And I met many of these people yesterday when I visited Cox's Bazar. But we also see that the impact on the neighboring countries, many of which are facing their own development challenges, can reverse development gains. So it's critical that in cases of displacement fueled by conflict, the international community continues to recognize and provide support to those countries that are hosting large numbers of refugees and vulnerable migrants. We see the same phenomenon playing out in Africa, where conflict continues to displace more people than any other factor. Since the current conflict broke out in Sudan, 8.6 million people in the region have been forced to flee their homes. That's 8.6 million people in just 1 year. It is one of the largest displacement crises since World War II and the biggest displacement crises on the planet today. In another massive conflict-driven displacement crisis, about 40% of Ukraine's entire population was displaced in 2022, 7 million people. In all, about a quarter of our work around the world is focused on supporting displaced communities around the world. Now, the World Migration Report points out another troubling aspect about migration, which is a growing global migration inequality. Now, I explained before how the total proportion of migrants hasn't changed significantly over the last several years. But what the data is showing us is that most migration is now taking place between relatively wealthy countries, and that is a change from the past. The migration pathways that are available for people from less developed countries have narrowed in recent years, arguably driving more people to resort to irregular migration pathways. Because the jobs haven't disappeared. In fact, in 30 of the top economies all across the world, we saw labor shortages that cost $1.3 trillion in losses to those economies. So if we do not address the inequality in terms of safe, regular, orderly pathways between less developed and more developed economies, people, communities, and countries will fall further behind. The evidence is overwhelmingly clear that migrants are driving human development and poverty alleviation. One way they do it is through their remittances and sending money back home. So the good news is that international remittances continue to flow back to low and middle income countries, despite predictions that they would have stopped or slowed down during the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, they've continued to go up. From 2000 to 2022, remittances rose by a staggering 650%, from 128 billion US dollars to 831 billion dollars. Now, the reason that is so important to so many of you in the room is that for low and middle income countries, remittances far exceed foreign direct investment. Remittances also far exceed any overseas development assistance. Last year, migrants from Bangladesh sent remittances worth 21.9 billion US dollars to the country, and that's just remittances that were sent back through formal channels. The amount of money that is coming back into the country may actually be much higher. What that means for all of you in the room who are investing in economies is that investing in safe and regular pathways for jobs for migrants is an investment that goes well beyond just traditional development assistance. And we know that migrant workers and the diaspora are feeding, housing, and educating their families. And from afar, these migrants are strengthening the economies of their communities, of their regions, and of their countries. So that's why if we want to create a world that is more sustainable, if we want to create outcomes that are more equal, if we want to avoid leaving people behind, we must harness the power of migration. Now, we've seen reams of evidence of how migration will help grow economies. Recently, The Economist had a cover story in which it noted that the extraordinarily strong, and that's a quote from the article, economy in the United States post-COVID is at least in part credited to migration into the United States. And that's a migrant labor force happening in all sectors, from agriculture to healthcare to engineering and other sectors. At all skill levels, we are seeing migration fuel prosperity. And as the World Bank has noted, more than 80% of migrants are moving because they're searching for better opportunities. They're looking for higher wages. They're looking for access to better services. They're looking, in some cases, for more personal safety, even when they will not qualify as a refugee under the existing definition in the Convention. And the demand for migrant workers is only going to grow. This is not just about people seeking better opportunities. This is about companies all over the world looking for more people to do the jobs. They're looking for talent in every skill sector, in every economy across the world. And we know that demographic changes are only going to drive the need for more international migration. By 2050, people over the age of 65 are going to represent nearly 40% of the population in Japan and in the Republic of Korea. And Italy, Spain, Greece, and Portugal, they're not far behind. Now, on the flip side of the demographic equation, the world now has the largest youth population in history, 1.8 billion people between the ages of 10 and 24. And most are living in countries where the economic opportunities for formal work simply do not exist. So if we're going to bridge the equality gap, we need to bring a forward-thinking, strategic, and comprehensive approach to development. And migration should be part of that approach. It should enable people to choose migration, in most cases, instead of being forced to move or instead of moving through an irregular channel. We can and we must connect migration, development assistance, livelihood opportunities, and even urban planning into one comprehensive approach. Human mobility can then be more equal through pathways like geographic free movement arrangements. And if we do that strategically, if we do that with a rights-based approach that is not exploitative or extractive of communities from less developed economies, those fragile economies can grow stronger, and the growing economies can expand more equally. And in all of this, vulnerable communities, including women and children, will be better protected. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, excellencies, we want countries like Bangladesh to continue to grow and prosper. We want development outcomes to be more equal. We want people in fragile economies to have the chance for success. To get there, though, we need to devote more time and more resources to what we know works. And that means dedicating more time and resources to facilitating more regular pathways for migration. Now, the benefits that the world will get from this would be immense. Number one, the people themselves will be less vulnerable to exploitation. More migrant lives will be protected. What we see right now is that people moving through irregular channels are more likely to be subjected to violence, to exploitation, and to abuse. We also know that the business model of this $10 billion smuggling industry will be thwarted if people can directly apply to a safe, regular, and orderly migration pathway, rather than relying on a smuggler or trafficker to facilitate that pathway. We also know that public confidence in migration will go up. When people are coming on an airplane with a job to do work that is valuable to an entire community, no matter where it is in the world, the public is often grateful. They won't say it out loud, but they will say it quietly. There's no better example of that than when we look at COVID and the number of migrants around the world who provided frontline assistance when everybody else was staying at home. We also know that we are contributing to the development of the migrant herself. We are contributing to the development of the country that she is working in. And we're contributing to the development of the country that she is coming from. In the long term, the evidence is showing us that regular pathways will better protect migrant rights. It will enable governments to better plan for and manage migrant movements, and it will support development in countries of destination and origin. The countries that best understand the migration landscape, those who are proactively and strategically and very deliberately using migration as a tool for development, will be the ones that are best positioned to tackle the challenges of this decade, but most importantly, to tackle the challenges that we know are yet to come. So, as I close, I want to thank all of my colleagues at the International Organization for Migration who worked on this report and all of those who worked on the launch. This is a vital project for the world right now, and to anyone at IOM who participated in it, thank you. I also want to thank our international partners whose data we used as we put together this analysis, and to our colleagues within academic communities who are working in research or who are otherwise contributing to the great work of this report. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we know what a precarious situation the world is in today, and it is critical that we look for ways to collaborate on what should be a common goal: to see everyone flourish peacefully and safely. But right now, the political rhetoric does not match that reality. And that's dangerous. It's dangerous for all people, and it's dangerous for all economies. The world needs migration, but we need migration that is strategic, that's informed by data and by evidence, and that brings a whole of society approach. So through this edition of the World Migration Report, we are seeking to shape a conversation and a set of policy outcomes that focus on the data, that focus on the evidence, that focus on the truth. And that way we can achieve better migration outcomes for more people. And we hope that you will learn from it, that you will use it, that you will share it, that it will form the work of everybody in this room who works on migration, and that in doing so, together, we will make this world a better place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director General, for a very evidence-based, policy-oriented presentation. I'm sure that these will have far-reaching consequences in the global debate on migration. Madam Director General, I see that you have already gone into the realm of moving the toxic migration narrative into a more healthy, productive, and humane narrative. For that, on behalf of Bangladesh, let me congratulate you. This debate is missing from the global trend, and it needs to be brought back. Thank you very much, Madam Director General. At this stage, please allow me to call upon Mr. Adrian Kitimbu to share the digital tool of the World Migration Report 2024. Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hack, for the introduction. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to start by thanking you all for joining us here today for the launch of the World Migration Report 2024. I am especially excited to present to you the various World Migration Report 2024 digital tools which the Director General just referred to in her speech, and that we have developed to supplement the report and with the aim of increasing the report's reach as well as its accessibility. And for this new edition of the report, we continue to embrace the opportunities that technology brings and have developed these tools to get key data and information in the World Migration Report into the hands of busy users, tailoring them for policymakers, for educators, for media professionals, and fact checkers. Now, I would like to begin with the World Migration Report 2024 Interactive. This is a platform that was initially developed for the World Migration Report 2020 and designed to present some of the key data and information in the World Migration Report in an interactive and visually engaging way. This platform has been highly successful and has gone on to win multiple international design awards over the last few years. For the World Migration Report 2024, we have updated and expanded the interactive, and users can visit the microsite and explore and engage with a range of data, including global international migrant stock data, including a new visualization of this data disaggregated by gender across different age groups. We again, as you see on my slide here, include and update the long-term international remittances data for the top sending and receiving countries globally. And for this edition, we are also excited to present another new visualization on predictive indicators, which users can explore on a tile map and a table, both of which present data from various indexes, as well as migration and displacement data that can be highly useful in assisting decision makers to better anticipate some of the key migration challenges as well as opportunities ahead.